Good morning. Let's keep all those in our thoughts and prayers that are going through various medical issues. Brother Doug didn't ask you, but I don't see Sister Stabler here. Is Peggy feeling bad again? Okay. Let's keep her in our thoughts. Brother Doug's not doing too hot either. Brother Terry is still waiting on his medications to either work or be changed again. Sister Rosie, Tina, Charles, Moody's, April's on the mend. Holly's still waiting until next year for surgery. Doug's dad, Tim's brother. I mean, it's almost easier to list those that don't need our prayers than it is to name those that do need our prayers. But is there any? And Rick May is going to have his major procedure this coming Friday. If you didn't see the email or all, there's going to be 2 heart surgeons in while they're doing the repair work on him. So if you need 2, that sounds to me like it could be a little bit edgy. So let's make sure we keep them in our prayers. Anyone that we've missed? Chris May is not feeling well either. Okay. Brother Jim, would you lead us in a prayer, please? This next question hadn't got anything to do with the Bible, but have you ever been in a conversation or been in a room with anybody that they spoke the same language you did, but you only understood about half of what they said? Every day? Andrea and I went to Huntsville yesterday, and one of her cousins had passed away and was buried in Arkansas, but they had a memorial for him yesterday in Huntsville. And in the room, you look around and everybody looks normal. But they were all engineers from NASA, and her cousin that passed away had over 500 patents. They compared him to a modern day Tesla or Einstein, and they were getting up heaping praise on him about this invention, that invention, and I was catching bits and pieces of what they was talking about. The only reason I mention that is when we sit here and study the Bible, it is written so that everybody can understand it. All we have to do is put in just a little bit of time, but if you put in the time, the Bible is for everybody, and everybody can understand it. So with that, if we will turn to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. Are we on chapter 20? I thought we was going to have a guest speaker today, so let me make sure where we're supposed to be. Yes, sir, 20. First Samuel chapter 20 is where we're going to be today. Because now remember that Brother Clonch had gone through and covered David, and Wednesday night he told me he thought he might have to get into 20, but he didn't. So And chapter 19 closed out with the question, wherefore they say, is Saul also among the prophets? And that was because he was in that region around Ramah, where I don't think Brother Terry mentioned this, but or at Naioth, where they had gone, where all this was taking place, other commentaries and all tend to be that Samuel had a school in Naioth where all the prophets and or where all the teaching and everything took place, and that's why it's mentioned there that all of them were talking that way. Now, when we get down to well, prophesy here is not when they're talking about prophecy here, it's not the prophecy that we think about as foretelling future events and all like that. Prophecy just basically means teaching, talking, praying in the general sense, and that's where we are here. Now, Samuel did not have a school there for teaching people to prophesy future events. He was just teaching them the way of way of God. Right, right. No, this is basically this them getting together and being studious and teaching. Verse 1 of chapter 20. David fled from Naioth and Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, what have I done? What is mine iniquity? And what is my sin before thy father that he seeketh my life? Now, he had a bout or two with him before where Saul had attempted to kill him, but here the word had gone out that everybody, in other words, it was sort of like David's picture was on a wanted poster. And if you recall how things went in the Old West, if there was a wanted poster out, generally it was dead or alive. Anybody that sees this, you're legal to take whatever means necessary to get this person. It also, at this point, brings me to mind anyway that this absolutely shows the divine nature of what is taking place. If the whole country is out after a person, how did David not manage to get himself killed? Because the king had said, all of you can go get him. So at least to me, it sort of lends to the divine area there. And when David is asking, what have I done? I think, to me at least, this shows his humbleness, that he is, even though he's heard the songs that he's killed his 10,000s and Saul his thousands, he's still humble to the point of that guy is still the king. He's still in charge. I'm the lesser of the two. So what have I done to him that's made him want to kill me? Verse 2, and he said unto him, God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing, either great or small, but that he will show it to me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? Is it not so? So Jonathan is just telling David that when I find out what's going on, I'll let you know, so you can be a step ahead of him. Do you think that Jonathan, well, let me go at it this way. Did Saul have a legitimate reason to fear David? Because that apparently is why he was trying to kill him, because it says in a couple of places that he feared David. So did he have a legitimate reason to fear him?
Not in a physical sense, but he did in that God had abandoned Saul and had set David up as the new king.
David was going to be the new king, but Saul had no reason to fear for his life. It was just going to be the way it was. And it sort of reminds me also then of, you go into Rome and you look at Nero. Why did Nero kill or have his wife kill his son. And historically, you find out that the reason they did that was because he did not want his son to take the throne from him. So it's all in Saul's mind that David is his enemy, when he's really not. God has proclaimed what was going to happen. But yes, ma'am. It does not come out in point blank say it, but if you read around the edges, Saul already knows that. Yeah. Samuel knew. So, no, yeah. That's why I say when you read around sort of the edges, that the knowledge is there, but I think her question was, had it been published to the kingdom? And now, envy, ego, and all of that works to a great extent here. And if you think about a book we'll get to shortly in the book of Daniel, why did the king, one of them there, divide his kingdom up into 4 pieces? Because he didn't want anybody to be greater than he. So if you subdivide it, yes, sir. Right. And now when you say that's a normal process, you're talking about that was the normal process with the judges, right? Because we hadn't got to Saul being the first king, we hadn't got to any patterns yet, right? Okay. Verse 3, and David swore moreover and said, thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes. And he saith, let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord liveth and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death. So David is just pointing out to Jonathan here that, yeah, you say you're going to be here, but your father can keep a secret from you. And you are in between me and death. There's one step between me and death, and that step is you. Because if you don't share knowledge, but it comes back to the point that I just said, that with God in charge, that was not necessarily so, was it? Jonathan said unto David, whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. So this is how much care each one had for each other, that Jonathan, I guess even at peril of his own life, was going to protect David, because he had already done that in previous chapters. Same way with Michal, Saul's daughter. Verse 5, and David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let me go, that I may hide myself in the field unto the 3rd day at even. What is the significance of the new moon here that's mentioned, and David sitting at the king's table? We have to go back a few books, and when we start talking about the lineup of all the feasts and all the sacrifices that they did, they had their annuals, they had their quarterlies, they had their monthlies, and everything in the Jewish calendar is based on the lunar cycle. So here it was a prominent day that all the people were to be at the king's table. And apparently it was at an event where it was also going to be a yearly event, because as we find out later in this chapter, the excuse that David gives Jonathan to tell Saul that he wasn't there was that it was the time for him to go be with his own family. And that was an annual event where the families were to get together. So just drawing a lot of things in here from the edges for us to look at. So number 6, verse 6, if thy father at all miss me, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If I'd have read it, I wouldn't have had to explain it to you a verse earlier, would I? Verse 7, if he say thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace, but if he be very wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him. How did David come up with this assessment that if he says, okay, everything's fine, that Saul would have no animosity toward him, but if he was upset, then there would be? If he came to the table, Saul would know where he was, but if he said, okay, how many people would deny or feel hurt if someone chose to be with their family at these appointed times rather than be with them? And so David is showing that he's pretty wise at this point. Verse 8, therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. Notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself, for why shouldest thou bring me to thy father? Do you think that David, as humble as he is and as wise as he is, does he not know the answer to this question before he asks it? Yeah. So what's the purpose of asking the question? If I have done any harmful thing, go ahead and slay me yourself. 2 things. Okay. He is pointing out his innocence, and he's pointing out his trust in Jonathan. Has anything similar to this happened before in the book of Samuel? What did Samuel do? Let's go back though. When Samuel was basically leaving the priest, when he was the judge and was going to turn it over to his 2 sons, and the people came and didn't like his 2 sons and said they wanted a king, did Samuel not make similar comments? If I have wronged you in any way, let me know and I will take care of it. Again, Samuel knew that he had not done wrong, but he's just putting it on them so that they will have a clear understanding of what's going on. And I think that same thing takes place here with David. And then verse 9, Jonathan replied, far be it from thee, for if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee, then would I not tell it to thee. So again, there's just a little back and forth going on here, that David is showing his trust in Jonathan, and then Jonathan is replying to that saying, I absolutely will tell you anything I know regarding you and your safety. And verse 10, David said to Jonathan, who shall tell me, or what if thy father answer thee roughly? And Jonathan said unto David, come and let us go out into the field. And they went out both of them into the field. And Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel, when I have sounded my father about tomorrow any time, or the third day, and behold, if there be good toward David, and I then send not unto thee and show it thee, the Lord do so, and much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do evil, then I will show it to thee and send thee away, that thou mayest go in peace, and the Lord be with thee as he hath been with my father. So again, there's just a little conversation taking place here. David trusts Jonathan. Jonathan is telling David he's worthy of that trust. If Jonathan finds out that there's good or evil that's about to take place, he's going to find a way to get the message to David. Anybody got any questions or comments so far? You got a little ahead. That's okay. Just verse 14, and thou shalt not only while yet I live show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not, but also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. And Jonathan caused David to swear again, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, and because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and shall remain by the stone Ezel. Before we get into the rest of that, what is the significance of 3 days? Basically, that is the cycle of the new moon, the same way as the full moon is on a 3-day cycle. It's only full at one time, but if you're into hunting and fishing, when's a good time to go out and fish? All else being equal, around the 3 days of the full moon. If you like to fish for brim, March of the year they go on bed. You can catch a bunch of them around those 3 days. So you can fill your freezer and then relax the rest of the year. If you ever have noticed wildlife operates on the nature weather patterns. If you, and again, I'm speaking to fishermen, if you're starting to go out fishing and you go by a bunch of cows and those cows are laying down in the field, you might as well turn around and go home. If the cows are not feeding, nothing else is feeding. Of course, if you like Bill Dance, he says you can't catch anything if you haven't got a hook in the water, so go every time you can. But still, again, if you're out hunting and you see some game basically dormant, nothing's going to be moving around, because the animals operate on the pressures, the fronts. One of the best times that you can fish is if there's a storm front moving in. As that pressure's dropping, what are they doing? They are filling up. So when the storm gets there, they can just go lay down and be full and not worry about it. So, I'm sorry? Okay. Won't quite go there, but all right. So, how'd I get off on that subject? Anyway, he's over here and he's staying by that stone Ezel, so Jonathan will know where to find him. And then he says, I will shoot 3 arrows on the side thereof, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send a lad, saying, go find out the arrows. If I expressly say unto the lad, behold, the arrows are on this side of thee, take them, then come thou, for thou hast peace to thee, and no hurt, as the Lord liveth. But if I say thus unto the youth, young man, behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away. And as touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of, behold, the Lord be between thee and me forever. So he just told him how he was going to let him know whether or not he was safe or whether or not he needed to run from danger. And then he closed it out by saying that God, he said between, but basically that just means that you and I are bound in the Lord forever. It's the same way that it started out, or we'd started out this section with him making a covenant.
Following exactly what he said. He didn't know what was going to be on one side of the passage. He didn't know what he wanted to do, so it showed a good reason why he ought to pay attention and listen to the command as far as what Jonathan said. I don't think that was so much shooting arrows, but say either wrong or so.
Especially in my direction. Well, I understand that, and I agree with you totally. But when I was young and dumb, I used to shoot an arrow straight up in the air, and I would stand under it and watch it come down, and I'd try to see how close I could get it to land to me. I was good until it went in the sun and I lost it, and then I ran. Notice I said when I was young and dumb. But yeah, David at this point has got to be close enough that he's going to be able to hear what's going on. So he has to know exactly where he has to be, so David won't. So Jonathan won't hit him with an arrow. Verse 24, so David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat down to eat meat. And the king sat upon his seat, as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. Just as a little side note here, why do you think it says that Saul sat upon his seat by the wall? So nobody could come up behind him. I know a few of you in here, Andrea gets kind of aggravated at me at times when we go to restaurants and she starts to sit down and I put her on the other side of the table. And that's because I want to have the view. I want to know what's going on. So here it's the same thing. Saul was just basically protecting his back. He wanted to see what was going on. Nevertheless, Saul spoke not anything that day, for he thought something had befallen him, and he is not clean. Surely he is not clean. So the first day he misses, in essence, what did Saul say? Why did Saul not say anything about that empty seat? Was hoping, but when he mentioned here he wasn't clean, that just meant that he may have come in contact with something that, they had to purify themselves if they had touched the wrong thing and all. So here there might be a legitimate reason he's not here. So I'm not going to show my hand. But then the next thing that happens, verse 28, verse 27, and it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meet, neither yesterday nor today? So now he's getting inquisitive. And Jonathan answered and said, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, let me go, I pray thee, for our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there. And now, if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. Therefore he cometh not unto the king's table. So everything is going according to plan so far. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. And he said unto him, Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. So everything has gone according to the way David had thought it would. It's planned out. But if you notice here, who does Saul blame for things? It goes back to the woman through Jonathan, that Jonathan has. And if you notice also here, it's not, again, that's what we've said before and what Brother Stabler brought up. It's not that there's fear for his life, but here he expressly says that Jonathan's kingdom will not be established. So he knows at this point, if David is not done away with, that family's kingdom is going to go away, that Jonathan will not be the king. He is a little perverse in his thinking here that if he kills David, that Jonathan will be the next king. Why? Well, there's a little precedence to the judges that things are turned over to family members, but when it comes to the king, and it'll happen later on, but here, he's thinking that, well, this is my kingdom, so naturally my heirs will inherit it. But God had another plan. Right. It did. Absolutely. Eliminate the competition. Okay. Verse 32, Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? And Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him, whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. Who did Saul throw the javelin at? Why? Well, Saul was mad, but what triggered it? Relationship between Jonathan and David, and Jonathan apparently talked back here when he asked why. And I got to say, though, as many times as Saul has thrown that javelin and missed, he's either a very, very poor javelin thrower or divine intervention again. Pardon? Seeing too. Pardon? Yeah. He's still mentally off a little bit. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and did eat no meat the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had done him shame. How did he do him shame? Yeah. And how do people insult people today? By calling them names and insulting their heritage. And we'll leave it at that. And it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad with him. And he said unto his lad, Run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out after the lad and said, Is not the arrow beyond thee? Pausing at that point, what did that tell David? You better be on the move. There is ill intention toward you. But then look what Jonathan does. He doesn't stop by just giving him a simple warning that way. He goes on and says, cried after the lad, make speed, haste, stay not. And Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrow and came to his master. So in addition to saying, it's beyond thee, letting him know that he was supposed to run, he added a few choice things to that. Be hasty. Get a move on. No time to wait. And after Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master, the lad knew not anything, only Jonathan and David knew the matter. So I can understand how it is that the lad didn't have a clue what was going on, because he hadn't been privy to the instructions that they had talked about. Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad and said unto him, go, carry them into the city. It's kind of odd here to use the word artillery, because we normally think of something else when we think of artillery. But here it's just basically his bow, arrow, and quiver. That's what they're referring to as his artillery. Weapons. Okay. But like I say, we normally think of artillery as the big rounds, the heavy hitting stuff. So, or back in those days, artillery would have been your catapults. 41, and as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south and fell on his face to the ground, bowed himself 3 times. They kissed one another and wept with one another until David exceeded. And Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. So from this, we can gather that Jonathan hung around after he had sent the young man back with all his equipment, so that he could have, at the time, they probably thought, one last conversation with each other, one last goodbye. And then he sent David on his way. And again, they reminded each other that they had made a pact between themselves and put God in the middle of that pact. When I was a youngster, I don't know if people do it much anymore or not, but I don't even remember the fellow's name, but we were blood brothers. We took that off of some old Indian movies that we watched. We actually cut ourselves and became blood brothers. Like I say, don't even know his name now. But basically that was if you did that, you was making a pact similar to what they did here, that you had each other's back. You were bond. You were together. Questions or comments on this chapter? At the age I was then, I didn't have a clue about all the diseases and such that could be transmitted by blood. Brother Clutch. It does. Lunatic. Anything else on chapter 20? Brother Golden. Well, he's talking about Jonathan. That's quite possible, but would she have had to have been a concubine to fill the requirements that he just laid against her? And also, a lot of times when men get angry, they accuse their mates of doing things that they're perfectly innocent of. So when his anger is aroused against Jonathan here, I take it to be that he is just lashing out at Jonathan. And part of the reason I do that is at the point he's saying this, he says, if you don't kill David, if David is not done away with, you are not going to inherit this kingdom. So if he didn't like Jonathan to the point of calling him in all these names, why would he be trying to elevate him to that position? Why wouldn't he pick one of his daughters? We know he had at least 2 daughters. So I kind of think he was just lashing out in anger. You know, when you get mad, your mind does strange things. Anything else, brother? Yeah, the eldest daughter was married to something might, I can't think of the first part of that. Brother Clunch? Okay. Yeah, names meant a bunch more than names mean today. Anything else? Brother Luke's gone out. I don't think I want to try to start chapter 21. Might get one verse of it, but we'll leave that for Wednesday night. So if there's nothing else, we'll just.
I would hate to have been in Jonathan's shoes. Between dad and David. And it's hard to come out of it.
It is, but and I think this might be a point where Jonathan is overlooked a lot, because Jonathan had a choice to make. He could do the right thing, or he could be with his dad. Now, he chose, in my estimation, the right thing, because he was not only looking out for a friend, but he was also trying to look out for his sister, because his sister was married to David. So when it comes down to a decision, sometimes hard decisions are not hard if you just look at what's right and what's wrong. And I always choose to go with the right. So, and that's my opinion anyway. Anything else? Thank y'all so much for your comments and your attention.